Thank you for joining us for tonight's artist panel discussion organized as part of the exhibition We Built This House on view through March 10th at the BC Lars Anderson Gallery here in Richmond, Virginia. Some brief context for this exhibition. We Built This House, which focuses on contemporary artists living and working in DC, was curated by a team of students as part of the Applied Curatorial Practices course. The students, including me, are participating tonight as moderators for this panel discussion. Joining us as members of the panel are 6 of the artists from the exhibition: Muse Dodd, Nikisha Durrett, Azizia Claudia Gibson Hunter, Jewel Ham, Waysonar Jones, and Amber Robles Gordon. They'll be answering and discussing questions about their work, themes from the exhibition, and the experience of living and working as artists in DC. In just a moment, I'll turn the time over to them for some brief introductions, following which we'll begin with the first of our moderator questions. But before we do, we want to say a sincere thank you to you all for joining us tonight, and most importantly, to these amazing artists who shared their work and their talents to make the exhibition possible, and who are now sharing their time and wisdom with us here this evening. The prepared questions portion of the panel should end around 8, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for audience questions. Audience questions can be submitted via chat at any time during the program, and then selected questions will be read to our panel by the moderators. A reminder to our guests to please keep your mic muted just to avoid any unwanted distracting audio. And also, as another reminder, Zoom actually allows you to click and drag to organize the meeting participants. We recommend that you organize your view so that you can see all the artists, aka the panel members, at the same time. The introduction is a great time to do that. For introductions, if you could please introduce yourselves. We'll go in alphabetical, starting with Muse Dodd.
Hi, I'm Muse Dodd. I use they, them pronouns. I am a visual artist who works in the media of film, sound, and performance. I'm also a curator and DJ. From Maryland, originally worked in DC. Currently, I'm based in New Orleans. But it's an honor to be included in this show with these amazing artists, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you all tonight.
Thank you. And then Nikisha Durrett.
Thanks, Muse. My name is Nikisha Durrett, and I'm an artist based in DC. I'm a mixed media artist. As of the last decade or so, I've been pretty primarily engaged with public art. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Azizia Claudia Gibson Hunter.
Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Muse. Thank you all. I'm a mixed media artist, and I've been working recently more in or adding installation. I'm I combine printmaking and painting, collage, the 3 together. And then that can shift over into sculpture. I was born in Philadelphia. I've been in Washington, D.C. for about 30 years, and went to Temple University, finished there, and then did Howard University for my MFA. Yes.
Thank you. And then Jewel Ham.
Hey guys, my name is Jewel. I am a recent graduate from the illustrious Howard University in 2020. I'm currently working in Charlotte, North Carolina because we love the Rona. And I am a mixed media visual artist, also a newfound curator and definitely an educator as well. Excited for tonight.
Thank you, as am I. And then we have Waysonar Jones.
I think you're muted.
Thank you. And then Jewel Ham.
Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. And then Nikisha Durrett. I think you're muted.
I think you're muted.
I think you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Can you see me as well?
Yes, we can.
Good, good. I'm Wason. I'm primarily a painter. I am sort of Washington adjacent. I mean, I've lived in the city before, but I've mainly lived in the close-in suburbs of DC. I'm obviously in my studio right now, which is, again, I'm like 6 blocks from the DC line. I do various kinds of work, ranging from really thickly textured sculpture-like paintings to, as seen in the show, abstract like portraiture. Those are probably the 2 main poles, I guess, of what I'm doing. But I've also done pastels and paintings on canvas and paper as well.
You, Wason. And then we have Amber Robles Gordon.
Hi, my name is Amber Robles Gordon. I am mixed media, sculptor, public art, installation art. And I've been doing this for a little while now. Definitely, yeah, a little while now, more than 15, 20 years. I'm also a graduate of Howard University, got my MFA, a little bit of HU up in here. Which actually feels good. I mean, I've curated, I've done all types of stuff, but I'm just still grateful that I can, call myself an artist and be, whether it be known for, and just do it, because it is still it's still a privilege, and it's a joy. So I'm glad to be here tonight.
And we are glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Have the privilege to get to know all of you guys a little bit more. I know I personally have had a lot of enjoyment from just viewing all of the amazing art that's in the show, and it's been such an honor just to be able to work with you guys and have this time here tonight. Before we move on to the questions, I'd like to read a brief exhibition statement we composed to introduce some of the key themes for our conversation tonight. In solidarity with the citizens of Washington, D.C., We Built This House showcases 9 DC area artists highlighting their roles in shaping their communities through art, performance, and storytelling. While DC serves as the seat of national power for the United States government, it is also home to over 5 million residents. In the midst of the capital city's ongoing struggle for statehood and its people's continued fight for equal representation, this exhibition seeks to recenter the conversation about DC by focusing on the strength of DC's long-established art communities, educational institutions, and vibrant music scene. We Built This House explores the soul of the nation's capital, providing space for each artist's representation and interpretation of their home. It engages its audience alongside artists and community members in efforts towards abolition and against gentrification, challenging us to see ourselves in the experiences of others. So for our first question, Carolina, if you could read yours to the panel.
Yes, hi. So I wanted to start off by talking about Nikisha Duret's large piece, Go Go Belongs Here. It's one of the first things that you see when you enter the gallery. And what strikes me is that it just really boldly declares the native culture of DC. So as members and stewards of the DC cultural community, I wanted to know, what other integral aspects of DC's local culture you guys feel should be highlighted and protected in that same way?
I hate when that happens when I'm teaching. My students make me feel so bad about that. I guess I'll start and just give a little backstory on the piece. And I'll just say that one of the cool things about working really large is that it commands attention. It takes up space. And it, you know, assuming that format for this piece was so appropriate because go-go is often this genre of music that is so, it's often mistaken as being so hyper local and only about DC. Um, when in fact, you know, I just thinking about when I was young and growing up in the suburbs of DC, that go-go music was actually, it was very mainstream in DC. It wasn't like this little musical thing that was happening over here. It was like central to everything. And it was like, and there was so much like coolness imbued in it. It was very cool and it was very exclusive. And one thing that it took me years, decades to realize that actually go-go is in conversation with um, global communities. Is not just DC. I mean, you think about um, um, go-go and hip hop and soca, like all these things were, all these musical forms were established in the 1970s, around the time when there were, you know, where um, communities were coming out of a lot of upheaval, and it was about a certain kind of celebration, and it was very much like a global kind of conversation across communities. So I think about go-go being much bigger than just the music. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to say that before we get into like a bigger conversation about it. It's also like a local, there's also like a huge business infrastructure that is associated with go-go. And so when, you know, Don't Mute, when the events that led up to Don't Mute DC happened, you know, it wasn't just an attack on music. It was an attack on um, local business, locally, you know, small Black businesses. And it was an attack on like Black culture in general. So when we talk about like preservation, I mean, go-go is storytelling. And, you know, no, I feel like I hear this a lot and I say this a lot. You know, only like we can tell our stories the best. And, you know, go-go tells the story of local Black life in DC. So.
I just wanted to add, along with go-go, DC has birthed some of the tremendous, tremendous jazz musicians, Duke Ellington being one of them. And I sometimes it's a little uncomfortable because I don't see the joining of the generations, the evolution of the music from blues to jazz to go-go happen, so that there's a embracing of the whole the trajectory that the music has taken. So and I think that's very interesting. I think that's very important for the young people to understand that there's that this is it's a development of the music, and that these different musics, these different forms are connected. Yeah, just wanted to say that.
So can I request something of Aziza? We've talked about go-go before, you and I, and if I want you to say something about the Congo drums and the history, the connection between that, because it couldn't come off my head the way that I know that you could do it.
Well, yeah, there is a connection to traditional African music in the beat. And right now, I want to make sure that I would have that perfectly correct, but I do know that the person that, what is it, Chuck, what's his name?
Chuck Brown.
Chuck Brown was very clear in his understanding that he was taking rhythms from the continent. And see, again, this is the, you know, this is the whole evolution of it, the whole, the development of it is much more than right here, right now, this is go-go. There's a history, there's an ancestral history to it. And I think it's just really important that we, that our young people understand that, you know, so that they can get the full weight of what the music is. And it gives it, it makes it demand more respect as you understand that it's not just a movement, it's not just it's not a music simply of the time of its era when it was developed, but that it has deep roots. Yeah.
So the thing I'd like to point out is, and I think Nikisha mentioned this, was in relationship to us telling stories. And I think that is like one of the most intricate or more essential parts of cherishing what is African or African American culture, is in how we tell our stories, because it can be so different depending on your what you are drawn to, depending on your history, depending on your education or your social experiences through the Black experience. But I think it is so important because, for example, part of go-go is the call and response that happens. If you've ever heard a go-go, if you've ever been to a go-go, there is there's like for lack of a word that they would, a term that they would use, like an announcer, along with sometimes it's usually the singer, but they do announcements to a certain degree. They have this interchangeable conversation with the audience, with the band itself, with the audience, and sometimes they actually do tell stories, and even in their I mean, there's like, they represent neighborhoods or they used to. It's been a long time since I've been to a go-go, when they used to do call outs where they would recognize people that passed. To some extent, it's like an extension of a like a service, a church service to some degree. I know that's a far reach if you've never seen that, but
I don't think that's a reach at all. Yeah.
Good. But so for example, I think in my description of the installation that I did for this show, I mentioned, or it was some installation, it might not be this particular installation, sometimes they get all jumbled in my head. Anyway, so some recent installation, I talk about Black experiences and how, they can happen and how we need to cherish them, and how it can happen in the church. It can happen in a cipher. It can happen in a community center. But these instances of us having our back and forth, our call and response, our way of engaging and cherishing each other, they're essential. They're essential to our communities. And so that's what I'd contribute to that.
And that's, and what you all are describing, like the call and response and the drum, talking drum, all of that is, I mean, that is straight from the motherland. That is straight from Africa. And I don't know that the teaching about that needs to be so didactic. It's just the fact that, like, this is something that is like, that has been, that folks who listen to go-go and who go to the go-go's and who are entrenched in the culture, it is something that they've witnessed and just have been passed down. It's not really like, it's not an academic experience, it's a spiritual experience. But I do think that the preservation of go-go is an academic exercise. And I think it's also a financial exercise. I think it's really beautiful that that go-go is now like the official sound of DC. But you know, now it's about what's next. Like, what are the actions that are going to cement that? I think that that was a huge first step, because now it's like, okay, it's the official sound. We have to preserve this. But also, as we know, music can begin to look very different when other people adopt it and decide that it's important. So what we want to make sure is that generations from now, that go-go actually still looks the same. So where, you know, we want to make sure that musicians are being supported. How is that happening right now? And COVID, like, you know, go-go happens in these very, it's about this live experience. The live experience is completely squashed now. You know, so what do we do about that? How are we making sure that these musicians are eating and that their families are taken care of? And, you know, and what happens after the pandemic? Yeah, so it's like, so it's one thing to make go-go the official music of official music of DC, but at some point it does become like this academic political exercise. Yeah.
So the only thing I want to say is I don't want go-go to stay the same, because I remember when my go-go experience versus seeing what teens were like when I was teaching, you know, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I was like, that ain't go-go. What are y'all doing? Or that's not how you dance to go-go. And then I had to check myself, because who am I to claim that what I know as go-go was the only way to perceive or to dance or to react to it. And to me, I want to see, as long as it's preserved in the sense where it's given a platform. And I don't know if you guys have heard like renditions of music, or even like at the end of the year, and you hear the songs that document throughout that year that you've been experienced to, and you have memories to. I want to see go-go, you know, progress, but of course I want to see it cherished in relationship to how it starts and how it progressed.
Yeah, I hear you. And I'm just going to say this real quick, and I know we have to move on to the next question. I don't know if anyone's been watching Fran Lebowitz show. I forget what it's called. Pretend It's a City, but she's talking about New York City and how everyone remembers the New York City is the time when they were young. Like that's the real New York, whenever it was that you were young. And so I remember like the real New York City was when I lived in New York in the 90s, right? People would poo-poo that, like, no, I wasn't real New York. So it's the same thing with go-go or any genre. Like to me, like the real go-go was like when I was in middle school, backyard band, like before, you know, Chuck Brown, like all, to me, that is real go-go. And I'm like, what are these kids listening to now? Beat your feet, like, what is that? What? But so I agree, like it has to progress, and it will, but it has to, it needs the financial support to do that. And so that's what, that'll happen on its own. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Before we move on to Cole's question, did you have something you wanted to say, Muse? I noticed that you had unmuted your mic at one point.
Yeah, I was trying to get in there, but it's all good. I was just gonna say, like what you said of Amber, of like wanting go-go like to say the same. Like I think, yeah, documenting like I think about like Spotify, like end of year wrap up kind of thing of like how can we honor where it's come. But I would say the core tenet of go-go is change. And what I love about go-go is like remixes of like how they, me being a DJ, of like thinking of like how you have the covers of these songs or like popular culture, and then you bring it into the go-go beat, and now it's a whole new jam. And I think Black people, that's just how we experience life here in the States and throughout the diaspora. But like being able to constantly evolve. And then even with the dances, it's like they are changing, and like as we are introduced to more diverse cultures and different types of music, they're going to adjust. And then with TikTok, everything is going to be a TikTok dance now. But I think I don't know if it's also a part of being Black in America, of having to constantly adapt. But then there's still that core tenet of, you can see the lineage of it coming from Africa to now, and you see like the different structure and the shapes of our dances and our music, of like the drum line and that heart, that pulse that you'll find in go-go music, or you'll find in second line music, or you'll find in in Brazil. So it's like we are constantly like, but that's creation, so we're able to have that energy and keep that moving. So I think if something is precious and we honor it, we should also allow it to
grow.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
It's about survival.
Mm-hmm.
Survival. We have always had to, because of the attacks, have to shift. What we're doing today, pivot. That has been the experience of being Black in America, and throughout the diaspora, that need to constantly change in order to survive. Yeah.
And then on top of that, we're talking about go-go, the music, but we're also talking about the release of dance and the healing of dance. This is all interchangeable, and it's not, although I think it's go is one of the extensions of us. And I was going to say, this release, this dance, this call and response, it can be found in other areas that have had African and throughout the diaspora. So it's not just us. It's just that our form in this area that we kind of, some of us that grew up here, were exposed to. But there are pockets of this throughout, and they're all precious. So.
And I just wanted to quickly say before Cole asked, I think Muse's piece, Origins of Blackness, which is featured in our show, is a very great experimental film, which kind of summarizes a lot of these key points we've made about go-go, and then like the survival and adaptation of Black culture in America and the Black diaspora. So if anyone watching wants to check it out, I highly recommend it. It's a very cool piece. But Cole, you can go ahead and ask your question to Jewel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cole. Hi, Jewel. So we had talked before about, about like your experience at Howard, and your also like experiences at other art institutions. So I would definitely love if you guys could like, I guess like as a group, have some conversation about Howard. But my specific question to you, based off of something that we talked about before, is the idea of like having a personal art history practice that's like running like parallel to your studio practice. And it came up as like as a motivation sort of thing, like what art history figures and what movements are actually sort of feeding into you continuing to make things, like especially as a Black artist, of course, like sort of finding your niche or niche things. So if you could like talk about like which artists and things like that, or like do that for you, and yeah.
The whole shebang. Okay, so just starting with being a visual artist and going to Howard, being initially from Charlotte, North Carolina, nobody was doing that. Certainly nobody Black. So it was really just like, okay, we're just gonna make a shake. But then I got to Howard, and then there's this whole community there of people that are my kind of people. And that really, really changed how I saw everything, especially my position in the art world. Because I think before or without kind of that community approach to art, you are without even realizing it, kind of moving in a more Eurocentric way, which is to work as an individual. Everything is me. It's just me. But really, like in everything that I do and everything that I wish to do, it's with the community in mind. It's with my folk. I'll mind my language tonight. But the thing is, Howard also exposed me to having a position in art history. When I was a senior in high school, I took AP Studio Art, and mind you, this was the only class I had left. I was really just taking it so I could be in high school. But let me tell you, we had to learn 250 artworks, and 2 of them were by people of color. And I did not say Black people, I said people of color. So really, I had this attitude of, what does art history have to do with me? Really, it's me. I'm moving forward and I'm doing my art because this is what I do. So anyway, but then I got to Howard, and then it's like you realize Black folks have been doing art in a large capacity for so long. Like really, like I always say, because my parents, they're cool as I don't know what, but they regular, they don't do art. So those are my ancestors, you know, like the art folks, especially specific ones. Like for me, I always say my auntie and my uncle are Emma Amos, that's my good sis, and Barkley Hendricks. Those are my great aunt, my great uncle. They made me the way I am today. So really just finding anyone, it doesn't have to be someone, those 2 people, you know, but really finding your folk in art history, it moves you in a way that it feels like, wow, well, me too. And then also I think having this past year, I was the curatorial fellow at the Art Students League in New York. And so the project we were working on was bringing light to Cinque Gallery. And the show will open in May, on my birthday, actually, May 1st. But Cinque Gallery was this collective of Black artists. And you've heard of a lot of them as individuals, but the collective, like, it died before the digital age. So, you know, you try to Google it, not much comes up. But the thing is, to think that all these people were together and just, you know, sharing space and collaborating and really working on their craft, that's not a new concept. And that's cool. Like, I feel like that drives me, because someday I'm going to have some day far away, I will have kids, and they'll have kids, or I'll know other kids, and they'll be knowing that they can do it, but it won't have to be some, I went to school and I had to do this XYZ research. It'll be mainstream knowledge. And that's what I'm hoping that my practice can do. So that's my 10 cents, my 20, shoot. Anyone else want to elaborate on Howard, you know?
So it's funny to hear you reference, what was it, Kendrick Barkley, and then I can't, what was the second one's?
Emma Amos and Barkley Hendricks.
Barkley Hendricks, thank you. Because it just dawned on me that the person that that fit that role in my life was Alma Thomas. But it didn't even dawn on me that I was like drawing in an ancestor. It just happened so instinctively for me, because I was exposed to her work early on by my mom. But it just dawned on me as you were talking about it, like, oh yeah, in some ways I was drawing in an ancestor and didn't even realize it, because I swear she's been with me ever since. And that is an amazing thing, because to hear from another Howard person, and then to hear that as they're talking about the Howard experience. And, you know, sometimes I feel, I love Howard. I love so many different intricate things, experiences and layers that I, you know, inherited from it. But on the other days, it just gets on my nerves. But, you know, like sometimes you gotta just, you know, say it. But you know, I'm just really grateful to hear that, and just to be able to, you know that that was part of my experience as well.
And I think also adding to that, I think it's a transient experience that I wish we could share more, because I think it's very unique to Howard. But now that I had it at Howard, I'm interested in finding it in other places. Like this summer, I was at the League and I worked with artist Nanette Carter, and I got to interview her for one of our programming pieces. And my question to her, because this is something that I kind of was just starting to really in my practice. So I was asking her, like, how did you really come into the confidence of your voice as an artist? And how did you really clarify and refine that? And she tells me, the answer is, when I got into the MFA program at Pratt, and then I moved to New York. But to hear somebody say that, like, yeah, I moved to New York, and it really just, it popped for me like generations before me. That is the power.
I wanted to say one of the things that Howard does is it acknowledges ancestral memory. And it has had times when it was very strong, and it has times when it has waned. But when I attended, that was considered, I mean, the whole concept of channeling even was a part of our instruction. So we looked at work from, there is a spiritual aspect of how we even considered work, how we read it and interpreted it and tapped that ancestral memory. And so I really respected that, because I had come to Howard from a predominantly white school. I initially went to Tyler. When I was there were maybe, I think there were 15 Black students in the undergraduate and graduate program, and there was no acknowledgement of Black artists at all. I mean, the library had books on African art, but no books on African-American artists. So I went to the main campus, Temple University main campus, where I found more, they had a Pan-African department. And so at least I could plug into that while I did my art. So there is, it's so important. It's so very important. And I think many of the artists that we have today that are coming from the predominantly white schools, unfortunately, a lot of times they don't get the opportunity to go back in time and to really make those connections from the Congo to the work that came out, the iron work that's in Louisiana, the ceramics that came from West Africa, and how the patterns on that affected, inspired some of the patterns that you might see in Afro-Cobra. I mean, there's like this, it's a tremendous river of information and aesthetic that needs to be, I want to see all of our artists have the encouragement to tap into that, because it's just an amazing reservoir of information.
So the other thing I want to say is that, let's point out for Howard, because I remember some of my peers at the time, either before I graduated or after, and they would tell me how many pages their thesis was. And I'd be like, what do you mean your thesis is 3 pages? Okay, my thesis was, I think, God, either 38 or 50 something pages. And because Howard, they didn't play when it came to your thesis defense, not only your defense, but also your paper. And I know that I definitely, bitched and moaned during it, but it's something that I will never regret. The process, even the strife that a few folks gave me during the process, because it made me a better presenter. It made me a better proposal writer. It made me able to present myself and my artwork in a totally different way that I can see in other people, that it's because their work hasn't been challenged enough. And so that was very essential to the Howard experience.
I think also speaking to that, not necessarily their work hasn't been challenged enough, but something I feel like I encounter with a lot of peers, people I know that did not go to a Black art school, is your audience is not necessarily the audience you're planning on working towards. So when they're giving you feedback, when they're listening, it's just not really there. I had a friend of mine tell me at X school that there's no Black professors at all. And they said in one of her critiques, like, she's loading a lot into her images. That's what we do as artists. Okay. Professor told her, maybe you can start typing up a pamphlet for your student for the critiques so that they can kind of get a clearer idea of some of the symbolism. Didn't ask a single other student to do it. It's just some of these things, these experiences that we're put through, they're not really conducive to our personal growth or our artistic growth. So I think it's very important for us to have spaces, community spaces. And if you don't necessarily have the opportunity or the privilege to go to an HBCU or Howard, trying to forge relationships with people that are also Black and doing things in your lane, outside. And now that the Rona is still roning about, like using the internet to kind of do that, because all you can do is kind of DM someone and, oh my gosh, I love your work. Can we talk about it? Because I've done that with tons of people, and people are, they're being open. But I think really like trying to forge that community of peers that are like-minded and have similar interests and intentions is really, really necessary as a Black fine artist right now. Really forever, but I'm right now, so I'll speak to that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I will say, for me, when I went to Howard, I graduated class in 2016, and I was in the School of Communications as a film major. So it was like interesting that the buildings, like even when you go on campus, the School of C is like down the hill, and then the School of Fine Arts, you gotta take that trek up there, and just seeing how kind of secluded each practice is from each other. And being a student in the film department and like not necessarily seeing myself going into like going to Hollywood or like even making documentary films. It wasn't until like my senior year, my sister Martina died. She's a curator, and she like asked me to be in one of her shows, and I was like, all right, whatever. And then I saw like this kind of world open, like the art world open for me, of being able to see like, oh, I can make video art, and I can enter and I can interact with people in different ways with my work. That having that feedback also like really impacted how I created work, and also like being able to talk about it and seeing of like thinking about space in my work as well, of like what does it look like to not just have a screen, and thinking about works that can work not only on your phone screen or on your computer screen, but being projected or like having an installation to go with it. So I think being in DC, honestly, yeah, that there's so many great like art institutions, and being able to go and having access to like the Smithsonian's, and like these are things that I didn't take like for granted, but there are things that I did so often it became part of my like practice, that when I like moved to New York and like talking to people about kind of like their art upbringing or like how they came into being, like I realized how influential even my non-art classes. I was an Africana Studies minor, so being able to delve into these topics that are like, then that's like a seed for an idea that maybe I'll explore 5 years down the road, but it's like that seed has been planted. So I feel like Howard was really good of like cultivating like the fertile ground for new ideas to grow and to expand. But yeah, I think we are our environment, and we're sponges. And thinking about, I was listening to a while back, Saul Williams had an interview with the Breakfast Club, and talking about like your diet is not only what you eat, but also what you consume. So like being aware of like the art that I'm consuming, and being around so many people talking about Black art, Black resistance, Black liberation, like that seeps into how you make art. And like not having to go from a Western point of view, but being able to center like my experiences and like my my family, my ancestors, that their experiences and how I put work in and forth into the world, and having a, I feel like that was when I first questioned like who is my audience, and it's always been like Black people, and like I feel like Howard like made it okay to do that. And when I've like I did like study abroad, and I've been in like predominantly white institutions, and people kind of being the only Black person and people looking at me like I like don't know, like I'm like trying to reference all the references I made to like Black filmmakers, people are clueless. But then if I don't know some of their greats, they're like, oh my gosh, you don't know. But it's like, okay, like you are totally clueless about my point of view. So like Howard definitely helped me orient in how I, you know, honor and like decolonizing kind of the pervasive culture of like whiteness and the Western, the classics, and like understanding that's just one point of view and not the only point of view. So shout out to Howard for that.
Yeah, thank you guys for those answers. Jasmine, do I ask my other question now? Can I ask my other question now? Okay, cool. Because I think that this really, this question really comes straight from what you were starting to talk about. So this is directed at Wason in particular, but it definitely goes for everybody. But so Wason, in your works that are in the exhibition, the works that are the Black Diamonds, you use like the acrylic medium, like these different textures. So I was thinking about how that's a pretty like new sort of like development as like a like as a medium in art, something that is specifically for making texture. And so within like you creating abstractions, like you're able to use the texture as, you know, as something that is like adding so much more to this abstraction, because you're sort of painting with the texture. So you're like really combining painting and sculpture. So it's coming from a place that doesn't necessarily have a ton of art historical history, and more like history as far as like, you know, mass production as far as like, you know, things. So you're working like in abstraction and with a material that doesn't have a lot of art historical context to it. So I'm curious how that kind of like lets you go further or deeper into abstraction. But I'm also curious with everybody, like how you have found your way to like approaching your medium, given the art history to it or lack thereof. Yeah.
I think that's where partly I have an advantage of not having been an art student. You know, there's a whole conversation around around that. And I mean, to be frank, when you're around DC, while at the same time I honor Howard for everything that it is in art history and art education, if you're not an alum, it can feel a little bit like you're a little bit out of the stream, you know, because I have so many friends that went to Howard, and it is a community, you know, and communities last often, you know, past your graduation date. But I mean, I was influenced a little bit by sort of tracking back to what Muse said about having the advantage of the Smithsonian's and having world-class art for free. Who was it, Dubuffet, I think. And a lot of people use sand in their oil paintings. So that was what first really keyed me into like a textured surface. But I mean, once I sort of got serious about my practice, I started with pastel, which is, again, is a very tactile sort of medium. And I did, I did a little research on my own about acrylic paints. And that's when I kind of saw, oh, look, there's all of these texture gels. And it's become much thicker, more intense. With some pieces, I mean, there's some small pieces up on the wall behind me. I was trying to emulate like rock, basically. I wanted them to look like they were carved out of pieces of granite or something, which some of them I think do achieve. Because a main thing about my practice and my work is I want to go for like a really visceral kind of effect and a I don't know, something ponderous. Like I want it to be kind of weighty. And I think those pieces do achieve that, in part because now they're coming off the wall more. So it's like you said, it's really sculptural, like they're projecting out at you. And I mean, the impetus for that was really simple. I tend to let my socio-political stuff just kind of channel, in my work. So it veers between something like those paintings are much more socially, they're from the Black President series. So those are all some sort of images of Obama in a sort of spiritual way. But the inspiration for the Pyramids at Giza series was just that idea of these massive, earthworks built by Black people. So that was kind of the idea, and rejecting all the space aliens, came down and, all of that kind of stuff. But again, to have them be really elemental in a way. So I feel like, I have freedom to really continuously explore the material.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's actually one of my favorite materials to work with, like the pumice gel and like the molding paste also. So I was really interested to hear more about sort of like what that you feel like that allows you to do, because I feel like it definitely gives you a lot of space. But yeah, if other people wanted to talk about how they approach their medium.
I can talk as a multimedia. I don't know. I do video. I do photo. I do soundscapes. I do performance. I DJ. I curate. I think it really, as I move, it really is just like, what is the best vehicle for this idea? And I see like a lot of this stuff like intersects. So I might be thinking about something or researching something for a film, and then I go and make a DJ mix, and then sampling. So I do a lot of sampling and remixing. And even with like when I'm doing film, it's like layering. So not only like the audio tracks, the music, the score, but also the video, like picture in a picture, and creating that texture with the video. It is kind of, I just like flow with it. And I try to like flow with what is calling me and also what's accessible, because making films are expensive. So when that's not like, or using myself as a subject, like, especially now with COVID, like using what's available to me. And a lot of people ask me like, oh, like, I want to do film, like, how do I get started? And it's like, use the stuff that's available to you. You have a phone that has a camera, you can use that. A lot of things are in Zoom. I've seen some really dope music videos like recorded on Zoom, and like being able to use what you have in your vicinity to create. And then as I just moved into my own space, so now I have more space, like in my 6-7 years as an artist, like never having like a studio, that's definitely impacted like how I create work. So like now I am able to expand and do, more stuff that I like want to have some type of tactile thing, or create installation stuff that I don't have to like take down at the end of the night. So it really is kind of like a mix between like access and space, and also just flowing with spirit when I can.
Well, I'll speak a little bit about my materiality. I think for me personally, I mean, yes, I did go to Howard, but really still I identify as a self-taught artist because they didn't teach me how to oil paint. So, the thing is, I feel like my process was just kind of doing it my own way. I was self-taught oil painting in high school, so I was very on, I'm doing it this way. So, something I started like that really has continued to really fuel my practice in different ways. I used to do my underpaintings with neon colors, like my oil underpaintings with like bright, bright colors. And I still do. That's not what I saw when I Googled it, but I decided that works for me. So with that being the case, I really continued along that path because color has been such an instinctive thing in my practice. And I think it's something that really hooks the regular eye in. And I think that's really important because to make art accessible, especially because so much of it has so much narrative and so much content, it needs to really exist and entice anyone's eye, So I really try to work with color in a sense that I think really is aesthetically pleasing, number one. But then also for me personally, I use a lot of red in my process, which the actual process of doing that really varies depending on medium, because sometimes like you want the red, the neon red, but like the oil paints ain't really trying to do it like that, So really finding that has been a dance because getting the reds correct is important to me. The reason being so is because the reason I use reds in my work so often is it's the notion of a shared ancestral blood behind all of my figures. It's a Black blood that runs through us all, and that blood is frustration. And the thing is, I started it like I was always doing color just because, again, I like it, period. That's it. I like it. My parents like it, my friends like it. Everybody likes color. Boom. But specifically, I started doing shirts this past year, a line for abolishing police, and I'm still very that. But the artwork that I drew for it was, it featured like it came from an actual protest photo of someone holding a pig. But of course, I wasn't going to put the person on the shirt. That would be wild. So I wanted to do something more universal. So I started I want to do a skeleton. I know I want to do a skeleton, blah, blah, blah. So I was starting to sketch and I was like, you know what though? Like, honestly, I'm just pissed. Like, really, I couldn't even get the drawing together. Like, so much was going on in the news, just so much. And then I thought of this idea, like, we as Black folks, we passed blood boiling. Blood has boiled to the bone and seeped up. Like, it's an ancestral kind of concept. So what would that really look like? And red as hell. And really, like, it's not about glorifying the trauma or anything of that capacity. For me, I use red as a point of beauty, but more so, that frustration to me is what gives Black people the ability to be extremely creative, extremely innovative, and move in ways that are simply unique to us. So I really try to highlight that in my work. So it is important in terms of materiality, how the reds show up. So I do different things with acrylics, different acrylic first. Maybe I'll use like a really cheap neon that I just know it comes out this perfect shade. And then, I might do a wash of oil. I might not, I might just leave it with the acrylic and I'll build a few more acrylic layers or some pastel, but really I'm working to make sure the colors pop and so that they're received a certain way. It's not even a specific technique. I feel like I'm constantly a student of life when it comes to my artistic practice. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, King.
And then just really quickly before Nikisha says something, I was just going to let the audience know that we are going to continue the questions up until 8:15 before we open up to the audience for their questions.
I was just going to say, I guess my response kind of goes back to the Howard University experience. I did not attend Howard. I went to a predominantly white art school in New York, and graduate school was a very similar experience. And I think that's partly why. But I think when I finished school, it took me about 6 years to make art again. So I started working at museums. I was working at a production shop at the Smithsonian, and I was working in a graphic shop, and I was making really large scale photo murals and graphic texts for exhibitions. And I just, like, around that time, I started thinking about making work again. And I just kind of saw, like, doing these massive installations of photo murals and all this, I just could see like how this large scale work could transform a space and capture the attention of the audience, and like just really like set the intention of the exhibition before you even enter the space. And I just started to think about, like, wow, what would it be like to make work that looks like this? And I also studied a little bit of graphic design when I was in college, and I was always just kind of interested in just mass advertising. And so I thought about like combining that aesthetic with, with like a fine arts practice, and eventually arrived at, making these really like large scale graphic based installations that sometimes have imagery, sometimes sometimes have figurative imagery, or sometimes it's text based. But I think that kind of that experience outside of art school informs my practice as much as my time, what I learned in art school. So.
Yeah, thank you. Oh,
I just
no,
wanted
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, first I wanted to say to Nikisha that I commend you for returning to your art, because there have been so many that haven't after that experience, because sometimes it's very traumatic. When an art student is when you're in that crit, your soul is exposed. And sometimes in some environments, it can be very cruel. And so I commend you. It took a lot of courage to return. And I'm glad that you did. I just want to say that.
Thanks, Aziza. Thank you.
Also, I just wanted to validate that. Keisha, I also attended Slade, which is an art school in London, for a semester. And that was the first time in my life I said to myself, I don't know if this is what I want to do anymore. Like and I was just stuck there. And then it's terrible because you get into this dance. I don't know if this was your experience, but you go to these elite programs and you almost have to like it because it's just so elite. You were so lucky to get in. Free us.
Yeah, it's very true. It was just like the whole, what you guys were saying earlier about like being challenged. Like it wasn't, it was that, we've heard about like the room of silence. Like you put your work up, everybody's got feedback for everybody else's work, and you put your stuff up and it's like everybody's buttoned up, like nobody wants to say the wrong thing. Nobody. So it was like kind of like, I went to these elite institutions. And in some ways I got a lot of technical skill. I guess I got exposure, I guess. And, but when it came to like real, like introspective looking at my work, I think that was something that was missing, and having people ask like the right questions and to push my work along. So when I got out, it was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I kind of had to cobble it together myself, which I am not at all like regretful of. Like, I think that things worked out as they, as they should.
All right, well, it's almost 8:15, so I'll go ahead and turn towards the audience to see if there are any questions. And if not, then one of our moderators could ask another question just to keep things moving.
Yeah, I don't see any questions coming up in the chat.
So in that case,
I can go ahead.
or
Oh yeah, go ahead, Grace. Great one.
So my questions was, I see in Amber Rose Gordon's piece, Remember Who I Am, as a journey from like the human experience to something greater, something unearthly. And I've noticed these themes and imagery of something unearthly in a number of the artworks in the exhibition, including those by Wason Jones, Azizia, Claudia Gibson Hunter, and Muse Dunn. I also find the idea of unearthly in the African American culture in films such as like Solange's When I Get Home, Beyonce's Black is King, in the HBO series Lovecraft Country. And my question to you guys, does science fiction help influence how you portray Black characters in your work? And or do you imagine yourself working in the tradition of Afrofuturism? Because that's something I wanted to get into now as recently as Afrofuturism.
So my childhood was filled with a whole bunch of Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, and I can't think of any others at the top right now, but so to me, sci-fi came before Afrofuturism. I didn't learn about Afrofuturism until way later, until in an academic setting. But most definitely what I decided was I wanted to project, I wanted to create things that either I wanted to be a part of, that I thought should exist, that I like. Sometimes there's 2 works in interdimensional realms that I created for my niece because I didn't see enough sci-fi, enough, even to this day sometimes, or I think I created that in 2016 or 2017. And I still didn't see enough, and not enough where it was a balance of Black love, where where it was a community and in loving situations. So the answer is yes, absolutely. But the academic terminology for it didn't come till much later, but absolutely.
Can I go? Okay. I think one of the things that is that we a resource that we have that sometimes gets overlooked is African mythology. And you want to see ideas, concepts that are just amazing, mind-bending kind of ideas, that is a good place to find it. And also in the stories that were told in the Deep South. Some of the stories that were told, you will find these are great places to go for inspirational material for what we call now Afrofuturism. My work, one of the things that I'm dealing with is the concept of boundlessness. And it's set against the concept of restraint. So restraint and boundlessness. And if you look at all of my work, I guess in the last 20 years, there's no rectangle that the work is within. It's always pushing out. It's always pushing out. And so it has these ragged kind of perimeters. because we're so much more than the Black body. And where I think I really began to tap into that was through African art. And the whole concept of abstraction is an African concept, you see. So all of these things, we're in a situation where the art history and you know, to be quite blunt, art history has been a pillar of white supremacy.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we have to do is to go back and question the interiors of art history. And but I don't want to get off on that. But I do want to say this concept of boundlessness, I think, came to me through exposure to African art and African literature. And even some of the stories that you might find from the Deep South, Zora Hurston, Zora Hurston, reading some of her work where she acted as an anthropologist and went down into the South and collected the stories. People like, I'm trying to think, My Life is in the Bush of Ghosts. That's a great one to take a look at. Somé is a wonderful, he and his wife, both they're a couple. She did a piece on intimacy. He did a piece on of spirit, and I want to say of spirit and water.
Of Spirit and Water, Madalama Somé.
Yes, yes, wonderful. I mean, you talk about traveling dimensions. The literature has the material for our young people to dive into and explore as artists. So I think that's, I just want to put that out there for you. And I know for myself, this whole idea of boundlessness and seeing myself beyond this body, this spirit thing is real for us. This ancestral energy is real. You know, the ability to call on your ancestors to guide you is real. And so all of that, I find definitely informs my work.
So I wanted to mention, you know, out of my own Howard experience, I can't mention Howard and not mention Black Artists of DC. Because my experience, and I say that because, you know, I'm looking at this board, and of course, Aziza was, you know, one of the people that initiated Black Artists of DC. Wason was a member, and or is, I don't know if still, and even Larry has, Larry Cook has some relationships with Black Artists of DC. And I'm saying it in the context of how essential, when we talked about Howard, we talked about the layers of how you learned about not only yourself, but also the extension and how your art is put out into the universe, or can potentially be put out into the universe, but also how you then can take a role beyond your own artwork and you know, lift up and bring other people along with you. And, you know, some of that was definitely I think it was rooted in me before that, but it was absolutely nourished through my interaction with Black artists, the artists and the curators and the people, art enthusiasts that were part of Black Artists of DC. So I can't attribute all of it to Howard, although part of the reason I found it was because I was researching about Howard and I needed an art, like an artist home along with Howard. So I just wanted to point out that was also part of my journey when it came to learning about African-American artists, period, African art, spiritualism, and just what a community meant or potentially could be for an artist.
I think coming back to this question of Afrofuturism and like its influence in my work, I am definitely feel like I fall in kind of that canon, but I also want to expand like, or I feel like Afrofuturism is so expansive that we I think not like, I feel like society or like the art world kind of like throws everything into the Afrofuturism label. If it's just like Black people creating work and they're like, oh, this is so progressive, of like, I wish there was the nuance within that of this is, you know, like this is Afro surrealism, or, you know, or like being able to recognize that Black people have been doing this for generations, and things that are historical can also will fall under like Afrofuturism. So I think Black people have always been the future. But yeah, I feel like it's limiting. I think it is, but I also like, I like the energy that's behind it, and that is like kind of igniting this space of wonder and this space of experimentation within it. I just want it to be more, I don't want people to get to, I'm on Instagram a lot, so I like looking at a lot of like young photographers, and or even I think people here have a concept and then are stuck into this framework of this is what it is, and hoping that we can like expand what that looks like, and like keep generating new ways of, and new conversation and new terms, you know. But yeah, I think I'm always thinking about mythology in my work, and like origin stories. The origin of Blackness is like my origin story, like a made up origin story of Black people, and a speculation, and thinking of like speculative fiction, like Octavia Butler, and like how we can create worlds for ourselves because we're left out of the history books. So a lot of my work is trying to like piece the holes, and then that's where the imagination comes in. So I'm interested in imagining a future where Black people are free, and like understanding that we have to like see it before it can be like materialized. So like opening up the space of like Black imagination beyond just an aesthetic, but opening it up into all different like aspects of our life.
So I was recently on a Clubhouse, I guess, I don't know what they call those, whether it's, I don't think it's a podcast, but on Clubhouse. And there was a conversation about colonialism and how do we restart the academic engine in relationship to Black art, or even dismantle colonialism and white supremacy. And I laugh because this kind of question was brought up towards like the end of the session. And so people were like, we can't answer that in this, you know, one, most likely we can't answer it, period, in its full, what it would really take to tackle that. But also the time frame, this wasn't enough. But my response, part of my response at that point was that one, because it was to a group of curators and other people, administrators, is that look for narratives that are unlike your own. Look for narratives that are representing people that that one, you can't turn to the right, turn to the left and see. And before you look for that narrative, or you take on that, or you respond to that narrative by giving them a platform or giving them a conversation or whatever, you know, questioning yourself, why haven't you seen or heard of this narrative before? And then on the other end, talking to the artists, you know, that were a part of that conversation, make sure that you continue to tell your narratives. It's extremely important. And I love how, so what do I call you, Muse? Or, okay, sorry,
Muse, yeah, Muse is good.
Got it, okay. I love how you are breaking down in relation to what you were speaking about, how to reframe what is what is the modes of art, like the canon, the way that it's set up, because that is absolutely the problem. The problem is that we are all stuck to some degree under the European gaze and the European academic understanding of art, and their hierarchy, and that is part of the problem. So it's absolutely essential. I love to hear it, and I hope that more of us absolutely figure out how to not only talk about our grief and our current state in some sense, because I do believe that some of our art must always reflect politics and social advancements or non-advancements, but also to project and create what you want to see. I think there has to be a balance.
Yes.
Has to be a balance because we are emotional beings, period, humanity. And we must feed that aspect of ourselves and then our wholes. So
we are so much more than what we've been told.
Whew.
And that is what we have to explore. What beyond what has been told. Yep. And really that canon has also been I don't know if they would admit it, but it's also been a barrier for whites, their growth.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for us, definitely, we have to, Black imagination is just, in all of this, we have always found a way to explore that imagination and we need our art historians to move beyond what the canon has given them. So like with music, we looked and we said, this is blues, this is soca, this is we named it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, as artists and for our art historians, we've got to name what it is that we do outside and beyond what that thing is, because it is restrictive, it restrains us, it does not allow all of this boundlessness that we have to grow and exist and mature. So I really think that it's very important as artists to name what you do, give it a name, and define it, and then turn it and look at it from all different perspectives, from underneath, from one top. Yeah, so I just want to add that.
But expect it to be challenged, but just be ready to defend it.
Yeah.
I just want to thank everyone for these amazing, insightful responses. This whole conversation that we just had I just wanted to share, one of my classmates actually challenged one of my professors because we were reading White by Richard Dyer. And she said, how is this supposed to help my art as a Black woman in 2020, reading some book written by a white guy when I know that there are several Black authors who have made books and written articles and so on and so forth about this topic, So I definitely think we're getting there. This is all about reclamation and taking up space and just making our mark in history. We're going to be that generation. Since it is 8:30, we are kind of closing the talk for tonight. I just wanted to give all the artists a chance to give any closing statements or share any final words.
I just want to remark that I haven't had a chance to actually see the exhibition and the physical space, but looking at the slides that you all showed, it's a beautifully curated and mounted show, and I think you all deserve all the kudos. And I wish that there were more curators around who were putting on shows like this. I mean, I think it's really, what you've done is really remarkable and really special and really powerful.
Here, yeah.
Wanted to, Aziza said it's important for you to label give what you're doing a name. So I want to give everyone in here is doing the name of the damn thing, and that's the slogan for me.
Amen. Yeah, congratulations, guys. It was a really good talk as well.
Congratulations.
It was great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, and I do want to say too that it took a certain amount of courage. Even I looked at the title of the exhibition and the stance of the curatorial piece, and I commend you for stepping outside of a comfort zone there, and I think you will grow from it, and I think it will help us to expand. So thank you.
I would like to thank you all the artists, amazing work. And like, this was fun, being my first time curating stuff. I'm happy it was you guys' work. And this panel was great food for thought for me. I took down a lot of notes. Thank you. Thank you all a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Like really for everything that each of you said, and also for all of your work. Very inspiring, very motivating. Yeah, and I'm very glad that I was able to like work with you guys and with your art and have this conversation. It's been really, really fun.
Did any other of the moderators want to say anything before we wrap things up for tonight?
Just thank you again for coming out tonight and participating. It's been so nice to work with all of y'all to curate this show, and then now just to actually get to hear you in conversation talking about the show and the work and these themes, and it's been really, really impactful, this whole process.
Yeah, just like thank y'all. Just wanted to like second, third, fourth, what everyone else is saying. Y'all have been so generous with everything that was said here, and I think seeing you all's like minds and insights come together in this way, I feel like how we imagined like it working in the show is just like a beautiful like addition to the whole project. So thank y'all.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to, oh, sorry.
Add the hearts. I want to add a heart to mine. How do you add a heart?
You
Go to
click
reactions.
on reactions.
Add a heart. How do you do that? Oh, awesome.
And I just wanted to say, thank you to all of you as well. It's been like a joy to like work and like coordinate the show with everyone. And I feel like this panel has been like so insightful for me, and just it's especially like lacking some of the, just because of COVID, some of the communication that between all of you that we might have had. Like this has been really great to hear more from all of you. So thank you.
Yes, I also want to give a huge thanks to everyone, both the artists for letting us sample their work and feature it in the show, and then giving us your time this evening. Also a huge thanks to all the audience members for joining us and giving us, someone to give a show to. We definitely enjoy your participation. And then I also want to thank Chase and Monica and the Anderson for providing us with this opportunity to put this show together at all. I know I personally have never been given a chance to curate, and this is definitely a passion that I've found over the last few months. So it's been awesome.
I have one more question for Miss Hunter. You mentioned a couple that wrote about African American literature. Do you mind repeating their names one more time?
You're turned off, Aziza.
Yeah.
Okay. Zora Hurston, who was an anthropologist. And I think I mentioned oh my, I know I mentioned My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. I cannot think of I know it starts with T. I can't think of the author's name. And then Some, oh yes, Some, S-O-M-E, the accent over the E. And he and his wife, but his piece, oh my goodness, it is wonderful. And then Octavia Butler, of course, you know of Octavia Butler. There's another wonderful writer, Leslie L. Banks, who is more contemporary, very interesting writing, futuristic, spiritual. It's just this combination of stuff, but you'll enjoy some of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.